Geoffrey Chaucer stands at the center of medieval English literature and is rightly celebrated as the father of English poetry. More than any other writer of the 14th century, he transformed English from the language of ordinary speech into a refined literary medium capable of expressing the highest artistic ideas. Now, Chaucer was born around 1343 into a prosperous merchant family in London. And unlike many earlier English writers who spent their lives in monasteries, Chaucer belonged to the royal court and served the crown. Throughout his life, he worked as a courtier, soldier, diplomat, customs official, justice of the peace, and member of parliament. Uh, these varied experiences brought him into contact with people from every level of society, kings and queens, then merchants, clergy, lawyers, craftsmen, pilgrims, and laborers. So, these broad knowledge of human life later enabled him to create the unforgettable characters of the Canterbury Tales. Chaucer's diplomatic missions to France and Italy exposed him to the literature of continental Europe, and he encountered the works of Dante Alighieri, Francesco Petrarch, and Giovanni Boccaccio, all prominent names whose influence profoundly shaped his poetic style. So, rather than merely imitating these writers, Chaucer blended continental literary sophistication with native English tradition, creating a distinctly English poetic voice. Chaucer's greatness lies not only in his technical mastery but also in his understanding of human nature. He portrays people realistically, revealing their strength, weaknesses, virtues, and contradictions with remarkable sympathy and humor. His characters are never merely symbols or stereotypes. They are living individuals whose personalities remain recognizable even today. So, for these reasons, Chaucer occupies a position in English literature which is comparable to that of even Shakespeare in the Renaissance. So, just as Shakespeare perfected English drama, Chaucer established the foundation of English narrative poetry. So we already know that he is called as the father of English poetry. He helped establish Middle English as a literary language. He introduced realism into English literature, and he was the greatest narrative poet of medieval England. He is the one who influenced Spenser, Shakespeare, Dryden, Pope, Wordsworth, and many more. Chaucer's life was closely connected with the political and administrative world of medieval England. Born into a prosperous wine merchant's family, he received an education that prepared him for service at court. As a young man, he served as a page in the household of Elizabeth de Burgh, where he became familiar with aristocratic culture and courtly manners. And during the Hundred Years' War, Chaucer joined the English army in France. He was later captured during the campaign but was ransomed as well, an indication that he already enjoyed royal favor. So his diplomatic missions to France and Italy proved decisive for his literary development. In Italy, he encountered the works of great Dante, Petrarch, and Boccaccio. Boccaccio's narrative techniques, especially those found in the Decameron, all important names. Okay, Boccaccio's narrative technique, especially those found in the Decameron, deeply influenced Chaucer's own storytelling. And when he returned to England, he held several important public offices. So he was the controller of customs in the port of London, and he supervised the collection of custom duties there, a position that brought him into contact with merchants and travelers. And later he served as a member of parliament also, which he continued to undertake royal missions. So, despite occasional financial difficulties in his later years, Chaucer remained a respected public servant until his death in 1400. He was buried in Westminster Abbey, which was a very famous, spot where the writers, the poets are buried in England. So he was the first poet. Actually, Chaucer was the first poet who was interred in what later became known as Poets' Corner at Westminster. So it is like it was an honor reflecting his immense contribution to English literature. So it's very important. Just mark this phases, like his birth year is taken as 1343. So his birth year 1343. He visited Italy in 1372 to 73. Then he was made the controller of customs in the year 1374, and Parliament member of Parliament he was made in the year 1386, while he died in the year 1400. So Chaucer's literary career is traditionally divided into three phases. So reflecting the major literary influences that shaped his development. The French period is the first one, and it represents Chaucer's apprenticeship. During this phase, he was strongly influenced by French courtly poets and their poetry as well as romances. Next is the Italian poet, and it marks his encounter with the great Italian humanists whose work whose works expanded his artistic vision and introduced him to new narrative techniques. The last one is his English period, which represents the maturity of his genius. So during this phase, Chaucer produced his greatest original work, especially the Canterbury Tales, combining French elegance, Italian realism, and the native English humor English style, into a uniquely English literary style. This gradual progression from imitation to originality illustrates Chaucer's remarkable artistic growth and explains why he occupies such a central place in literary history. Each stage of Chaucer's career reflects both his personal growth and the broader cultural influences of medieval Europe. In the French period, Chaucer admired the refined courtly tradition of the French poetry, with its emphasis on love, elegance, and allegory. Chaucer's contribution to English literature is immense. Before him, England had rarely been used to the works of the highest literary merit. Geoffrey Chaucer's contribution to English literature is immense. Before him, English had rarely been used for works of the highest literary quality. We said, like, we almost, there's no particular example of a work of highest literary quality of this phase or the phase before this. Even Beowulf was written in Old English. So Chaucer demonstrated that Middle English possessed the flexibility, richness, and beauty necessary for great poetry. He transformed characterization by depicting individuals with psychological depths rather than as mere moral types. His humor is compassionate rather than cruel, and his satire exposes human weakness while preserving sympathy for his characters. So, through the Canterbury Tales, Chaucer perfected the frame narrative, creating a structure that allowed him to present multiple stories while simultaneously painting a vivid portrait of the medieval society. His influence extended far beyond his own age, inspiring writers right from Edmund Spenser to Shakespeare to the modern novelists who continue to admire his realism and narrative skills. So these are the foremost reasons why Chaucer is remembered not simply as the greatest poet of his age, but as one of the founders of the entire English literary tradition. His literary career reflects a gradual evolution from imitation to originality, and his early works, as discussed, they reveal the influence of French courtly poetry, while his Middle English shows the impact of Italian masters. And in his mature English phase, we see, him producing the works of originality, extraordinary originality that firmly established English as a literary language. So his major works not only display artistic growth but also illustrate the transformation of medieval English literature from romance and allegory to realism and psychological characterization. So let's start with the book of Duchess. So the Book of the Duchess is his earliest major original poem and belongs to his French period. So it was written somewhere around 1368 to 1372. Kindly note down the dates along with the title. The Book of the Duchess is Chaucer's earliest major original poem, and it belongs to the French period. It was written to commemorate. It was written to commemorate the death of Blanche of Lancaster. The Book of the Duchess is Chaucer's earliest major original poem and belongs to his French period. So it was written to commemorate the death of Blanche of Lancaster, who was the wife of John of Gaunt. And he was one of the most influential noblemen in England, and he was also Chaucer's patron. So kindly make a note of it. The poem is cast as a dream vision, which was a popular medieval literary form, as we have discussed already. The narrator, unable to sleep because of melancholy, falls asleep after reading the story from classical mythology. And in his dream, he enters a beautiful forest where he encounters a knight dressed in black. Now, the Black Knight laments the loss of his beloved lady, whom the reader gradually recognizes as the Blanche of Lancaster. Through the dialogue between the narrator and the knight, Chaucer explores the themes of grief, love, memory, and consolation. Although it is written as an elegy, the poem avoids excessive sentimentality, and instead, the Chaucer presents grief as a deeply human experience, which combines emotional sincerity with courtly elegance. The work also demonstrates his early mastery of narrative structure and symbolic imagery. The poem's dream framework and the refined style, whereas an emphasis on courtly love. All these things were very prominent in the French poetry of the time. And we have prominent writers such as Guillaume de Pacon, and Chaucer was inspired from him. So he imitated his style of a dream framework and emphasis upon courtly love in his work. And nevertheless, Chaucer introduces a freshness and humanity that foreshadow his later masterpieces. Next, let's discuss the House of Fame. So, House of Fame also belongs to his. The House of Fame belongs to Chaucer's Italian period, reflecting the profound influence of Dante Alighieri and classical literature on it. Here, the narrator dreams that an eagle carries him to the House of Fame, where the goddess Fame arbitrarily grants or denies reputation to individuals. Now, Chaucer then visits the House of Rumor, where stories constantly circulate, change, and multiply. So the poem explores the nature of fame, reputation, truth, and the reliability of human knowledge. Chaucer raises philosophical questions about how people achieve lasting glory and whether public opinion can ever be trusted. The House of Fame displays great humor, irony, and intellectual complexity. Chaucer also experiments with narrative technique, presenting himself as an inquisitive observer rather than an authoritative teacher. So the poem remains unfinished, adding to the mystery of it and inviting readers to reflect upon the uncertain nature of fame itself. So it ends on a very, uh, it ends on a very mysterious note. Next, let's discuss the Parliament of Fowls. So we are discussing major works of Chaucer here. The Parliament of Fowls is one of his delightful dream vision poems. The narrator dreams of entering a beautiful garden where birds gather before the goddess nature to choose their mates on Saint Valentine's Day. And the central debate concerns three male eagles competing for the affection of a single female eagle, while the noble birds engage in philosophical discussions about love. Lower ranking birds interrupt with practical and humorous observations. Through this playful contrast, Chaucer explores the relationship between idealized courtly love and everyday reality. He questions whether love should be governed by passion, reason, or by free choice. The poem is significant because it contains one of the earliest literary association between Saint Valentine's Day and romantic love, which is a tradition that continues till date. So the work combines allegory, humor, philosophical debate, and vivid description of nature, illustrating Chaucer's growing artistic confidence. So the next work which we are going to discuss is Troilus and Criseyde. So Troilus and Criseyde, it is also regarded as one of his greatest achievements before the Canterbury Tales. And it is based upon Philostrato. Chaucer transformed an Italian romance into one of the finest psychological narratives in medieval literature. And please remember, this is the work where he dedicates this particular work to Goer, calling him as moral Goer. So this was the very work in which he dedicates this particular work to Goer and calls him moral Goer. So the story here centers upon Troilus, who is a noble Trojan prince, and Criseyde, who is a widow who gradually falls in love with him. So their relationship is encouraged by Pandarus, who is Criseyde's uncle, and he acts as a skillful mediator between the lovers. Their happiness proves short lived, however, and Criseyde is exchanged to the Greek camp as part of the prisoner exchange, and eventually abandons Troilus for the Greek warrior Diomed. Now, Troilus dies during the Trojan War, and the poem concludes with a philosophical reflection on the transitory nature of earthly love. Unlike earlier romances, Chaucer focuses upon the psychological development of his characters. Troilus is portrayed as emotionally complex, while Criseyde emerges as one of the most realistic female characters in medieval literature. Rather than condemning her simply as faithless, Chaucer presents her as a woman caught between personal emotion, political circumstances, and survival. So the poem also reflects medieval philosophical ideas concerning fortune, providence, and the instability of human happiness. Now, Chaucer combines romance with profound moral and psychological insight, making Troilus and Criseyde one of the greatest narrative poems in English literature. So kindly make a note of it. So far we have discussed the Book of the Duchess, House of Fame, Parliament of Fowls, and Troilus and Criseyde. So now it is your homework or your task to arrange them in order of Chaucer's literary development. So kindly comment with this work. Okay, kindly arrange it in the order they appear in Chaucer's career, and please put it in the comment box. So thank you for watching this video. We'll continue in the next video. We'll be discussing the Canterbury Tales.